Hello, I'm Ross Curtin. I'm a director in the Licence and Leisure team here at Colliers International. The majority of my work is dealt with helping bar and restaurant occupiers find new sites, as well as helping them dispose of problem sites. We work with the local data company. I find their information of great relevance to me when working with operator clients. It helps me identify which towns are improving, and we can look to monitor trends so we can then work with operators to identify new property opportunities in those locations.
Hello, I'm Matthew Hopkinson from the local data company, and this is a quick synopsis of the first leisure event that we held at Colliers International this morning on the 20th of May in London. So what we were really looking at is the role of leisure as the new anchor, and we analysed a number of aspects, and obviously for all those leisure operators out there, it's about understanding about locations and how they're changing, and the evolution and the structural changes happening in high street, shopping centres and retail parks up and down the country. Now, of significance that we noted and brought to the fore are two things really. Primarily that leisure operators are signing a 25-year lease in most locations, and secondly that they have capital expenditure of £500,000 to £1 million to fit out these locations. This is very different to comparison goods retailers, some which are signing 3 or 5 year leases and spending a minimum amount of money on fit out so they can be very quick to move in and out of locations and take advantage of opportunities. So there's a big difference there. When we looked at this, at the local data company, we track over 121,000 of these locations. So that was what we were basing the information around. And what was interesting is that the leisure vacancy rate is at 7.7%, which is roughly half that of the shop retail vacancy rate. The other thing of note that we mentioned by analysis of this data over the last 12 months is that the churn rate, i.e. the opens and closure rate in the leisure sector, is almost double that of comparison goods. It stands at about 20%. So 1 in 5 of these units, both independents and multiples, are turning over every 12 months. What we also looked at is going back to 2009, how this has changed. And what was interesting is that leisure has followed most of the sectors until really 2012, where it's really started to take off. And Ross Curtin from Colliers analyses in more detail, where we've seen a big rise in activity, both in terms of investment in these leisure operators, but also in terms of acquisitions and disposals up and down the country of properties. We then went on and looked at the top restaurant sectors, and what was interesting, Indian, Italian and Chinese feature at the top, but actually those ones are actually at no change or in general decline, and really it's the Japanese and the American. And when you looked at it in some detail, you start to see the rise of the Itsus of the world, Five Guys, Cleaver and others. So there are a lot of very interesting restaurant brands happening. And when you look across the high street, we talked about Cleaver, Chopsticks and shopping centres, and then coast to coast on retail parks. So there's a spread across all these different locations. And then finally we looked into Newcastle, Sheffield, Nottingham, Leicester and Preston, just as examples to see the changes. And what is interesting is that one is positive change in the direction of leisure, but that varies enormously across the board, with Newcastle being right up there and Sheffield. But then when you look at the diversity, which we did with Oxford University, you start to see a big difference, with actually Nottingham being much further out there, but also some locations seeing a reduction in diversity, so perhaps that's less attractiveness to consumers. The final thing we touched on was the role of shopping centres, and what I did was I did some analysis, and you can see Trinity leads 35% of the total offer is leisure. You can look at Union Square, Aberdeen at 30%, but if I look at Newlands and Kettering or Rochdale Exchange or Swan Walk in Horsham, they're all sub 5%. So there's a big variance across these locations. So in summary then, leisure is increasingly important, and what I think is important is about the knowledge and understanding the trends of places and the best places to locate, be it shopping centres, retail parks or the high street. And obviously here at the local data company, we're well positioned to create that analysis. Some of the interesting work we're up to at the moment is analysing performance of leisure operators across the sector in terms of actual sales and how the environmental changes taking place are impacting that profitability. So if we can help, please do get in touch. Thank you.